There is a moment in every dismissive avoidance journey that people don't talk about. A moment when their walls don't just go up, they harden, lock, freeze. A moment when even the person they cared for cannot get back through the door. Not because of you, not because of what you said, not because of what you didn't do, but because something inside them snaps into a stage they rarely escape from once entered. And if they reach this stage, the door isn't just closed, it's sealed. But here's the twist. They don't reach this stage because they didn't feel anything. They reach it because they felt too much. And now, here's the part you need to understand. They don't start distant. They become distant, piece by piece, thought by thought, fear by fear. At first, they tolerate closeness. They even enjoy it. Quietly, carefully, secretly. They let you in just enough to feel something, but not enough to lose control. They watch how you love, how you show up, how you stay. And deep down, they like it. They crave it. They soften because of it. But soft is dangerous to someone who's lived their entire life protecting the parts of themselves they've never felt safe to reveal. And that's when the internal conflict begins. Because with you, their defenses start cracking, and that terrifies them. In their mind, love equals exposure. Exposure equals vulnerability. Vulnerability equals risk. And risk is the one thing they swore they'd never take again. So when love starts to feel real, they don't lean in. They pull back. Not dramatically, not loudly, not obviously, but subtly, quietly, silently. They respond slower. They initiate less. They detach emotionally, while keeping the connection's outline intact. They're still there, but not really present. You feel the shift before they ever acknowledge it. You feel the cold front in their tone, the distance in their silence, the withdrawal in their energy. But instead of leaving, you lean in harder because you care, because you see the good in them, because you sense the connection they're now pretending never existed. And the more you lean in, the more pressure they feel. You didn't do anything wrong. You simply got close enough to reveal a part of them they weren't ready to face. And that's when the cycle deepens. They start looking for logical reasons to justify the emotional fear they don't know how to verbalize. They tell themselves, it's too much. I'm not ready. I don't want a relationship. They deserve someone better. I need space. It's moving too fast. It's not that deep. These thoughts aren't truth. They're protection. Because admitting the real truth, I feel something and it scares me, would require openness. And openness feels like danger. So they convince themselves to shut down slowly instead of facing themselves honestly. And this is the point where most people feel the urge to fix it, repair it, reconnect, reassure, prove they're safe. But reassurance, to a dismissive avoidant, feels like pressure. Love feels like expectation. Closeness feels like loss of control. And once they feel they've lost control of their emotional boundaries, the retreat becomes deeper, more consistent, more final. They stop letting you see anything real. Their emotions go underground. Their fears go silent. Their intentions go dark. You're still talking, but you're no longer reaching them. You're still trying, but they're no longer available. You're still holding on, but they're already halfway out the door. Not because you pushed, but because love pulled. And when love pulls too hard on a dismissive avoidant, they run. But here's what almost nobody realizes. They don't run to escape you. They run to escape themselves, their feelings, their needs, their fear of dependency, their fear of abandonment, their fear of vulnerability. When these fears peak, they reach the stage where emotional shutdown feels safer than emotional truth, the stage where the mind takes over and the heart shuts down completely, the stage where they disconnect, not only from you, but from themselves. And when they cross that emotional threshold, that's when the door closes, not slammed, not locked with rage, just quietly, sealed shut from the inside. Not because you were wrong for them, but because you were right. Too right. And they don't know how to handle that. They don't shut down overnight. Avoidants don't wake up one morning and suddenly decide they're done. No, it happens slowly, quietly, internally, long before you ever notice a change. Avoidants enter the closing stage in tiny, almost invisible ways, ways you only recognize later, when the damage is already done. It starts with small withdrawals, a slightly shorter reply, a little less warmth, a little more space between messages. Then, a hesitation, a pause, a moment where you feel them thinking instead of feeling. You don't know it yet, but they've entered the phase where their heart wants you, but their nervous system is trying to protect them from you. This is the most painful stage because the connection is still alive. The care is still real. The bond hasn't broken, but something in them is quietly shifting. Avoidants don't close the door because of you. They close it because of the mirror you hold. You show them intimacy, consistency, emotional presence, things they desperately want, but were never taught how to receive. So the conflict begins. Part of them leans in, part of them pulls away, part of them imagines a future, part of them fears it, part of them feels safe with you, part of them feels threatened by how safe it feels. Because for an avoidant, safety doesn't feel like love. Safety feels like danger. Safety means vulnerability. Vulnerability means risk. Risk means loss. And loss is the wound they have spent their whole lives avoiding. So slowly, they start to prepare themselves to detach. Not because you're wrong, not because you're too much, not because their feelings faded, but because their feelings deepened. And deep feelings feel unsafe. Here's the heartbreaking truth. Avoidants don't run from lack of love. They run from the presence of it. They run when it gets real, when it gets close, when it gets intense enough that their walls start shaking. They run when emotional intimacy lights up the parts of themselves they've spent years burying. The fear of being abandoned, the fear of being seen, the fear of being dependent, the fear of being hurt, the fear of disappointing someone who truly matters. You didn't trigger them. Their history did. You didn't activate fear. You activated longing. You didn't make them uncomfortable. You made them feel again. And that's exactly why they start to close off. Because nothing terrifies an avoidant more than the feeling of finally being understood. When you understand someone who's used to hiding, they panic. When you get close to someone who's used to distance, they freeze. When you offer depth to someone who's used to being alone, they shut down. They don't want to lose you, but they also don't know how to keep you. They don't want the relationship to end, but staying feels just as scary as leaving. So they stay in the gray area, half in, half out, connected but unreachable, present but distant, close enough to feel you, far enough to avoid needing you. This is where the door starts to close. Not loudly, not dramatically, not with a big fight. Quietly, emotionally, psychologically, energetically. You feel it before you see it. You feel the shift in their tone. You feel the weight in their pauses. You feel the silence between the words. You feel the tension in the air. Even when everything seems fine, avoidants always hope they can stop caring. before you notice. They hope the door can close without making a sound, but it always makes a sound because deep inside, they're grieving the connection, even while they're still in it. They're torn. They want the bond, but they also want the freedom to avoid feeling too much. They want you close, but they want control over how close you can get. They want intimacy, but they want distance to feel safe. This is the stage where they test your reactions. They delay. They withdraw. They offer less. They hope you don't notice. And if you don't chase, if you don't panic, if you don't beg for closeness, they take it as confirmation. Good. They don't need me. I can retreat without hurting them. But if you do chase, if you try harder, if you increase your emotional reach, they panic even more. This is too much. I can't meet this. I'm failing them. I'm going to disappoint them. And that panic tightens the lock on the door. This is the moment. Most people blame themselves. What did I do wrong? Did I scare him? Was I too emotional? Was I too available? Did I love too deeply? But the truth is simple. You weren't the trigger. You were the revelation. You didn't cause the wound. You exposed it. You didn't break them. You made them feel. And that is the one thing avoidants aren't prepared for, because feelings mean attachment. Attachment means vulnerability. Vulnerability means danger. You see, avoidants don't close the door because they don't care. They close the door because they care more than they can manage. And caring deeply is the exact thing. They don't know how to survive. When an avoidant reaches this stage, everything inside them is conflicted. Their heart says stay. Their fear says go. Their soul says you're safe. Their trauma says you're a threat. Their emotions say lean in. Their coping mechanisms say pull back. They're fighting themselves, not you. And yet, you're the one who feels the consequences. Their silence becomes your confusion. Their distance becomes your anxiety. Their withdrawal becomes your overthinking. But you must remember this. You are not the problem. You are the catalyst. You awaken a version of them they've spent years running from. And when someone isn't ready to meet the part of themselves that finally wants connection, they close the door to protect the world they built inside. Even if the world inside is hurting them, even if the world inside is lonely, even if the world inside is suffocating. Avoidants don't run from love. They run from the pressure that love brings. The pressure to show up, the pressure to communicate, the pressure to care openly, the pressure to heal what's unhealed, the pressure to grow past their patterns. And this stage, this silent closing, it's where they choose between two paths: stay and transform, or leave and retreat. Most choose retreat, not because it's right, but because it's familiar, not because it's what they want, but because it's what they know, not because they don't feel connection, but because connection requires the one thing they fear most: emotional responsibility. And that's why this stage hurts you. You're not losing them. They're losing themselves. You're not being rejected. They're rejecting their own capacity to connect. You're not being abandoned. They're abandoning the part of themselves that could have loved you fully. And when the door finally closes, it's not anger. It's fear. It's overwhelm. It's emotional paralysis. But it's never indifference. Never. They feel more than they speak. They care more than they admit. They notice more than they show. And they grieve more than you'll ever see. This is the beginning of the stage where the avoidant closes the door, not because connection is wrong, but because connection became undeniable. And undeniable emotions are the one thing they don't know how to hold. You need to understand something crucial. Dismissive avoidants don't collapse all at once. They don't break down in front of you. They don't show you their fear. their confusion, their regret. They unravel in silence, quietly, internally, privately. And there comes a moment, a very specific moment, where their internal world shifts. Not because of you, but because of them. Not because you pushed, but because what they feel can no longer be ignored. It's the moment, after all the distancing, after all the withdrawing, after all the emotional shutdown, when they suddenly feel the consequences of what they've done, and they don't know how to handle it, because dismissive avoidants are built to avoid pain, not face it. They're built to stay in control, not admit they're losing it. They're built to keep emotions low, not confront emotions that rise like a tidal wave they didn't see coming. And here's the part most people never understand. The moment you detach is the moment they destabilize, not because they want closeness, not because they're ready to change, not because they suddenly become emotionally available, but because losing access to the emotionally safe person in their life is the one loss they never prepared for. And that's when they reach the stage you need to be aware of. The stage that looks like, I don't care. I'm fine. It doesn't affect me. I've moved on. But underneath, it's panic. It's grief. It's the beginning of emotional collapse. Because for the first time, the very first time, they feel the absence of the person who made connection feel less dangerous. When you withdraw your energy, their distractions stop working. Their routines lose meaning. Their emotional numbness cracks. Their defenses weaken. Their distance feels empty instead of safe. You don't see this shift, but they feel it, and they feel it deeply. It's the moment they realize you were the stable one. You were the steady one. You were the emotionally grounded one. You were the person who cared without demanding more than I could give. You were the one who didn't judge me for who I wasn't ready to be. And suddenly, their usual coping strategies don't work anymore. They can't outrun the feelings. They can't distract them away. They can't detach enough to silence the ache. But instead of going toward you, instead of repairing, instead of taking accountability, they double down on avoidance because that's all they know. Their brain says, connection hurts, closeness is unsafe, dependence is dangerous, feeling too much means losing control. So instead of healing, instead of opening up, they shut the last door inside them and turn the lock, not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much and have no tools to face any of it. This is the stage where dismissive avoidants start rewriting the story to protect themselves. It wasn't that deep. I didn't need them. I'm better off alone. I never should have gotten close. These are not truths. These are defense mechanisms. This is their emotional armor, tightening around them. It's not about you. It's about survival. But here is the part that hurts the most. When a dismissive avoidant hits this stage, there is nothing you can do to pull them back. No message, no reassurance, no softness, no patience, no love. This stage isn't about reconnection. It's about shutdown. Not because you failed, but because their nervous system cannot tolerate the intensity of what they feel for you. And so they do what they've done their entire life. They suppress, they detach, they walk away internally, long before they walk away externally. But listen, and listen carefully. This stage is not a reflection of your worth. It is not proof you weren't enough. It is not evidence that you imagine the connection. This is simply the moment where their emotional injuries become stronger than their desire for closeness. You reached a part of them no one else ever touched, but you also reached the part they fear the most, the part they choose not to face. not to heal, not to confront. And when that happens, they don't walk away from you. They walk away from themselves. And that is a battle. You will never win for them. They don't reach this stage suddenly. Dismissive avoidants don't collapse overnight. They don't wake up one morning and decide, I'm done. I'm over it. I don't need them. It's slow, subtle, invisible from the outside. A process that happens quietly, in the background, layer by layer. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's not explosive. It's a shutting down of the system. And by the time you notice it, they've already been living inside it for weeks. Because avoidants don't close the door. When they're angry, they close the door. When they feel nothing. And that is the part no one tells you. They don't shut down because they hate you. They shut down because they've disconnected from themselves. And once that internal disconnection happens, the emotional doorway you used to walk through so easily is gone. It's not locked. It's not blocked. It's gone. This is the stage where your reassurance doesn't land. Your love doesn't register. Your presence doesn't reach them. Your words feel distant, even if you're standing right beside them, because they are no longer relating to you from the heart. They've shifted into survival mode. And in survival mode, connection feels like a threat. Intimacy feels like pressure. Affection feels like obligation. They aren't pulling away from you. They're pulling away from their own emotions. And once that happens, the relationship stops having oxygen. You feel it first, before they say anything, before they admit anything, before they even know how to articulate it. You feel the change in the way they respond, the way they don't ask questions anymore, the way they stop noticing the small things, the way their presence feels muted, diluted, watered down. That's the stage where the door has already started closing, and avoidants don't reopen it because someone asks, or begs, or proves themselves, or explains their heart. They only reopen it when they feel safe enough to look at their own feelings again. And many don't, not because they don't miss you. They do, deeply, privately, in ways they'll never say out loud. But missing someone and being emotionally available to them are two very different things. A dismissive avoidant can miss you for years and still not come closer because longing is safe from a distance. Connection is not. And when they reach this stage, the stage where they internally disconnect to protect themselves, they stop believing they can offer anything real. They convince themselves, I'm better alone. They're better without me. I can't be what they need. I'll only disappoint them. These aren't excuses. These are their fears pretending to be logic. And once their fear becomes logic, the door closes fully, not with a slam, not with an explosion, but with a quiet, final click that you only hear in hindsight. So how do you know the door is closed? When your love no longer reaches them, when your warmth no longer softens them, when your presence no longer grounds them, when their emotional world is no longer shareable, not because you changed, but because they shut off the part of themselves that can connect. You can feel it in your body, in your intuition, in the way the connection feels, like a ghost of what it was. And here's the hardest truth. You can't reopen the door for someone who closed it to avoid feeling. You can't love them back into safety if they're afraid of being seen. You can't convince them of your heart when their fear is louder than your presence. You can't save someone who believes distance is their only form of protection. But here's what you can do. You can stop trying to break through a wall that wasn't built by you and cannot be torn down by you. You can stop giving CPR to a connection they're emotionally avoiding. You can step back, not because you're giving up, but because you're choosing yourself. And that, ironically, is the only thing that has ever made an avoidant reopen the door. Not pressure, not pursuit, not proof, but the clarity that you are no longer willing to sit outside a closed door that they won't even acknowledge. This is where your power returns. When you stop trying to pull someone back into depth they fought to escape. When you stop shrinking yourself to make intimacy feel safer for them. When you stop saying, "It's okay, I understand," to avoid being abandoned. When you stop believing their emotional limitations are a reflection of your worth. Because the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop explaining, the moment you stop performing emotional labor, they never reciprocated. You become the mirror they can no longer avoid. And avoidance always, eventually return to the mirror they ran from, not because they're ready to connect, but because they're finally forced to face themselves. And when that moment comes, when they quietly circle back to the door they once closed, you will be the one who decides whether it opens again, not them, you. Because the truth is simple. Once an avoidant reaches the point where the door closes for good, it doesn't just end something for you. It ends something for them, too. Something they won't understand until they finally learn that shutting down doesn't protect them. It only leaves them alone with the very emotions they were trying to escape.